The late afternoon sun bathed the small southern town in warm light, highlighting its charm and sophistication. Quaint shops lined the cobblestone streets, their windows filled with displays of elegance. But beneath the town's polished exterior lay the invisible chains of tradition, still bound tightly to its roots. Inside her car, Renee Carter adjusted her pearl earrings, glancing at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her tailored navy blue dress hugged her figure in a way that spoke of success and resilience. At 35, Renee had achieved what many only dreamed of, a high-profile career as a lawyer, breaking barriers with every case she won. "You ready, Leah?" Renee asked, her voice steady and calm. Her younger sister, Leah, barely out of college, nodded eagerly from the passenger seat. "Ready to celebrate you," Leah replied with a grin. "You killed it in court this week, sis. This is your moment." In the back seat, Miss Evelyn adjusted her scarf, her wise eyes gleaming with pride. "You've come a long way, Renee. I couldn't be prouder," she said, her voice steady and warm. Renee smiled softly. "This victory isn't just mine, Miss Evelyn. It's ours. You taught me to fight, to never back down." The trio stepped out of the car, heels clicking against the pavement as they approached the Magnolia Room. The restaurant was a picture of refinement, its white columns and blooming flower beds giving it an air of exclusivity. Renee had spent years avoiding this place, but today felt different. Today, she walked in as someone who belonged. Inside, the dining area sparkled under crystal chandeliers, the soft hum of conversation filling the air. Renee and her companions approached the hostess stand, their excitement palpable. "Good afternoon," Renee began, her voice carrying a quiet confidence. "We have a reservation under Carter." The hostess, Megan, glanced at them, her smile faltering ever so slightly. Her eyes darted to the nearly empty dining room, then back to Renee. "Ah, let me check," she said, flipping through the reservation book with deliberate slowness. Renee noticed the hesitation, the slight tension in Megan's posture. "I'm sorry," Megan said finally, her overly polite tone ringing hollow. "We're fully booked for the afternoon." Leah frowned, her gaze shifting to the rows of unoccupied tables. "Fully booked?" she asked, disbelief coloring her tone. Renee remained composed, though her jaw tightened. "I see several open tables. Are those reserved?" Megan hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. "Well, yes, and we have a large party arriving shortly." Before Renee could respond, the manager, Mr. Fletcher, emerged from the back, his expression calm but firm. He placed a hand on Megan's shoulder, addressing Renee with a practiced smile. "Is there a problem here?" he asked smoothly. "We have a reservation, but your hostess is saying you're fully booked," Renee replied, keeping her tone even. Mr. Fletcher's smile tightened. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter, but we do have a dress code and certain standards to maintain. It's possible there was a misunderstanding when the reservation was made." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Leah's eyes widened, and she took a step forward. "What's that supposed to mean?" she demanded, her voice rising. Miss Evelyn placed a calming hand on Leah's arm. "Not here, child," she murmured, her tone calm but firm. Renee met Mr. Fletcher's gaze, her expression unyielding. "I see. Thank you for clarifying," she said, her voice steady. As the trio walked back to their car, Leah's frustration boiled over. "How can they get away with this?" she exclaimed, her voice cracking. "It's 2025 and we're still treated like this, like we don't belong." Miss Evelyn's calm voice cut through the tension. "Because this town hasn't changed. Not enough, anyway. But we fought worse than this before, and we'll keep fighting." Renee remained silent, her thoughts swirling. Memories of similar moments flashed through her mind. Being followed in stores as a teenager, being underestimated in law school, and now, this. She clenched her fists, not out of anger but out of determination. "We'll leave," Miss Evelyn said, her voice resolute. "But this isn't over." Renee looked up, her gaze steady and filled with purpose. She didn't respond, but the promise was clear in her eyes. This insult would not go unanswered. Renee sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of tea. The humiliation from the Magnolia Room still clung to her like a heavy fog. Her mind replayed the encounter in loops, each detail carving deeper into her resolve. "Fully booked," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head. Her voice was bitter, tinged with the weight of disbelief. "How many times does it have to happen before it stops stinging?" Across the room, Leah paced back and forth, her arms crossed tightly. "You'd think we'd be past this by now," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "You're Renee Carter, for God's sake. You've won cases that changed lives, but to them you're just careful." Miss Evelyn interrupted from her seat near the window. Her voice was calm, measured. "Don't let anger speak for you." Leah stopped mid-step and turned to her mentor, her face flushed with emotion. "But she's worked so hard, Miss Evelyn, and they still treat her like she doesn't belong. How is that fair?" Renee raised a hand, silencing the argument. "It's not about fair, Leah. It never has been." She stared into her tea, her voice soft but steady. "This isn't new, it's just louder this time, and maybe that's the point." Miss Evelyn nodded approvingly. "That's right. The louder it gets, the harder it is to ignore. But Renee, this fight isn't just about you." Renee looked up, her brows furrowed. "Then who is it about?" "It's about all the ones who'll come after you," Evelyn said. Her eyes were sharp, filled with years of wisdom and struggle. "Every time you stand tall, you pave the way for someone else. I fought for you before you even knew how to fight. Now it's your turn to carry that torch." Renee's grip tightened on her cup. She let out a long breath, nodding slowly. "So, what do I do?" "You do what you've always done," Evelyn said. "You fight, not with your fists, but with your mind, with your voice." The next morning, Renee sat at her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her mind raced with questions. Was this the right move? What if it backfired? But then she remembered Leah's frustration, Evelyn's wisdom, and the quiet strength that had carried her this far. She began to type. The words came slowly at first, then faster, pouring out like a flood. She described every detail of the encounter at the Magnolia Room, the sting of prejudice disguised as professionalism, the weight of generational struggle, and the strength it took to walk away with dignity. When she finished, she stared at the screen, her chest tight. With a deep breath, she clicked Post. By evening, the post had gone viral. Renee's phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, comments, messages, and shares from people across the country. Some expressed outrage, others shared their own experiences, and a few, of course, dismissed her as playing the race card. Leah read through the comments, her frustration boiling over. "Do you see this garbage? Why does everything have to be about race? They just don't get it." "They don't have to get it," Renee said, her tone calm but firm. "The people who need to hear this will." And they did. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities began to amplify Renee's story. But with the support came backlash. Hateful messages filled her inbox, accusing her of seeking attention, of fabricating her experience. "You okay?" Leah asked one evening, watching Renee scroll through the messages. Renee sighed, closing her laptop. I don't know, she admitted. It's exhausting, but I can't stop now. Not when so many people are listening. A week later, Renee's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. Hello, this is Renee. Hi, Renee, this is Oprah Winfrey. Renee froze, her mind struggling to process what she'd just heard. Hi, Miss Winfrey. Oprah's warm laugh filled the line. You can call me Oprah. I've been following your story and I wanted to reach out personally. What you're doing is important, Renee. Your voice is powerful and I'd like to help amplify it. Renee blinked, her throat tightening. I don't know what to say. Thank you. How about this? Oprah continued. Come on my show, share your story with the world. This isn't just about one meal, Renee. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. Let's make sure they know they're not alone. Renee swallowed the lump in her throat, her resolve hardening. I'll do it, she said. Let's make it count. A week later, Renee sat across from Oprah on national television. The bright studio lights and cameras didn't faze her. Instead, she felt a deep sense of purpose. I grew up in a small southern town, Renee began, her voice steady. From a young age, I learned that being black meant being watched, questioned, underestimated. I worked hard to prove I belonged, but no matter how much I accomplished, there were always moments like the Magnolia Room to remind me of the barriers that still exist. The audience listened in silence, captivated by her words. Oprah leaned forward, her expression empathetic. And yet, here you are, she said, breaking those barriers one step at a time. Renee nodded. Because I refuse to let anyone define my worth. And I want others to see that they can do the same. Oprah smiled. This isn't just about you, is it? No, Renee said, her voice firm. This is about every person who's ever been made to feel small. It's about showing them that they're not alone. By the time the interview aired, the story had reached millions. Conversations about racism, exclusion, and resilience echoed across the country. Renee realized that her fight wasn't just personal. It was part of something much bigger. As she sat in her quiet home that night, scrolling through messages of support, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. The fight wasn't over, but she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The street outside the Magnolia Room buzzed with anticipation. A crowd of people from all walks of life gathered, their murmurs blending into a hopeful hum. Reporters lined the sidewalk, microphones in hand, while cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing the charged energy in the air. Renee stood near the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at Oprah, who stood beside her, calm and composed. You're about to change everything, Oprah said softly, her voice carrying a weight of certainty. Renee nodded, her throat tight. I just hope they're ready to hear it. The crowd quieted as Mr. Fletcher stepped out of the restaurant. His face was pale, his usually composed demeanor now visibly shaken. He cleared his throat, trying to project authority. Excuse me, he began, his voice wavering slightly. This is private property. I'm going to have to ask you all to disperse. No one moved. The silence stretched, heavy and unyielding. Oprah stepped forward, her presence commanding. Mr. Fletcher, she began, her voice firm but measured. We're here today because this property no longer belongs to exclusion. It belongs to the people. Fletcher's mouth opened, but no words came out. Oprah reached into her pocket, pulling out a set of keys. These, she said, holding the keys high, represent a new chapter. A chapter where everyone, no matter their race, background, or circumstance, is welcome. She turned to Renee, extending the keys to her. Renee hesitated for a moment, the weight of the moment pressing on her. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped forward and took the keys. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers ringing out like a wave of liberation. Renee turned to face them, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. "This isn't just about me," she began. "It's about every person who's been told they don't belong, every person who's been judged, dismissed, or silenced because of who they are. Today, we reclaim our power." The cheers grew louder, and Renee paused to let the emotion of the moment settle. She scanned the faces before her, some smiling, some crying, all inspired. "This isn't the end," she continued. "It's the beginning. Together we can build a world where everyone has a seat at the table." As the crowd cheered again, Renee felt a wave of relief and triumph wash over her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like she was standing alone. Later that evening, social media was ablaze with videos and photos of the event. Renee scrolled through her phone, her notifications overflowing with messages of support. "Renee, look at this," Leah said, holding up her phone. "Reclaim Our Power is trending nationwide." Renee smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's not just about today. This is bigger than us." Ms. Evelyn, standing quietly in the corner, wiped a tear from her cheek. "You've done something remarkable, child. You've given people hope, and hope is where change begins." Renee walked over to Evelyn and hugged her tightly. "I wouldn't be here without you," she said. Evelyn patted her back gently. "You would have found your way, Renee, but I'm glad I got to see it." In the weeks that followed, the Magnolia Room was transformed into the Unity Table. Renee and Oprah worked tirelessly to redesign the space, turning it into a community hub filled with art, photographs, and stories celebrating diversity and resilience. At the first community dinner, Renee stood at the front of the room, her voice filled with gratitude and determination. "This space is more than a restaurant," she said. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we refuse to let hate win. Together, we can create something beautiful." The room erupted into applause, but this time, Renee didn't feel the weight of proving herself. Instead, she felt the power of collective strength, of a community coming together to rewrite its story. The soft hum of conversation filled the air as the newly renamed The Unity Table opened its doors to the public for the first time. The space, once shrouded in exclusivity, now radiated warmth and inclusivity. Its walls were adorned with vibrant art and photographs, snapshots of diverse faces, stories of resilience, and moments of unity. Renee stood at the entrance, watching as the first group of guests entered. Families, couples, and individuals from all walks of life gathered, their smiles wide and their curiosity evident. Leah walked up beside her, her excitement barely contained. "Renee, this is incredible," Leah said, her voice tinged with awe. "You did it." "We did it," Renee corrected, her tone steady but filled with emotion. She looked around, taking in the sight of the bustling crowd. "This isn't just about me, it's about everyone here. They're the ones who'll keep this going." As the evening progressed, Renee led a group discussion in one of the restaurant's private rooms. The topic, addressing racial bias and fostering understanding. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Renee began, her voice calm but firm. "But it starts with conversations like these. It starts with us being willing to listen and learn, even when it's uncomfortable." An older man raised his hand. "But what about those who refuse to change? How do we reach them?" Renee paused, her gaze steady. "Not everyone will be ready, and that's okay. Change isn't about convincing everyone at once. It's about planting seeds. Some will grow immediately, others will take time, but every seed matters." The group nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Miss Evelyn, seated at the back of the room, smiled softly. Later that night, Renee sat with Leah and Miss Evelyn at a corner table, watching the room come alive. Laughter and conversation filled the space, a stark contrast to the tension she had felt months ago. Leah leaned forward, her eyes bright. "You know, seeing this has made me think I want to do more." Renee raised an eyebrow. "More?" "I want to go into social advocacy," Leah said, her tone confident. "Watching you fight, seeing all this, it's inspired me. I want to help create change, too." Renee's expression softened. "Leah, that's amazing, and you'll be incredible at it." Leah grinned. "Guess I've got a pretty good role model." Miss Evelyn chuckled, her voice warm. "You both are remarkable. It gives me hope to see you carrying the torch forward. When I was your age, I couldn't have imagined this, but here we are." Renee reached over and took Evelyn's hand. "We wouldn't be here without you. Everything we've built stands on the foundation you laid." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening. "And now, it's your turn to keep building." As the evening drew to a close, Renee stood at the center of the room, tapping her glass to get everyone's attention. The room quieted, all eyes on her. "First, I want to thank every single one of you for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "This space is more than just a restaurant. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "For too long, places like this have been used to divide us, to make people feel like they don't belong. But today, that changes. The unity table belongs to all of us. It's a place where everyone has a seat, where every voice matters." The room erupted into applause, but Renee held up her hand for silence. "This isn't the end of the story," she continued. "It's just the beginning. Together, we can build a world where everyone belongs. And I hope this space becomes a part of that journey for all of us." As the crowd cheered, Renee stepped back, her heart full. She caught Leah and Evelyn's eyes, both of them smiling through tears. The room buzzed with energy as the night went on. Conversation sparked connections, laughter bridged divides, and stories flowed freely. For Renee, it was more than she could have ever imagined. Sitting back in her chair, she watched the scene unfold. The exclusion she had once felt in this very space was now a distant memory, replaced by something far greater: hope, unity, and the promise of a better tomorrow.